Welcome, everyone, to another session of our adult learning pod. And the title of this learning pod is The Domino Effect. All right. So to start us off, I am going to pull up an image and you folks tell me the series of events that's going to happen. Here we go. Tell me what's going to happen. You're probably saying, obviously, one domino will hit the next domino, and then it will follow like a little bit of a train and go all the way around until all the dominoes are knocked over. How do you know that with surety? It's through observation, correct? As well as the laws of physics that govern physical matters on Earth. So this illustrates the domino effect. Intuitively, you probably can figure out what is the domino effect. But let's look at what the domino effect is. Okay? It's going to be our word of the day. Except in this definition, it's not called the domino effect. It's called the knock-on effect. It says, an event or process action that causes several other events to happen indirectly, one after the other. Secondary indirect effect, consequence implication. Other synonyms are chain of events, ripple effect, domino effect. So ripple effect, chain of events, domino effect, knock-on effect. Because I'm of a Caribbean background, let's go with the domino effect. You like that? How about that? Now, are there synonyms to that? Well, we talked about a few of them, but let's look at some other synonyms to the domino effect. We have two residents of New York City discussing the situation. The situation. What are other words for knock-on effect? Notice what it says. We discussed some of them. The domino effect, slippery slope, the ripple effect, causal sequence, cause and effect, chain of events. Can you think of some of the domino effects that have occurred in history? Well, before we go into that, the first domino in the domino effect is the initial event or the triggering action. So let's take it from that. Can you think of an initial triggering event, a first domino in history? Give you a couple of seconds. I'll pull up one for you. Tell me, and you can comment freely, please, in the comments on the channel. Can you figure out what is this initial triggering reaction? Can you identify this event in history? This is probably one of the most famous ships ever. Maybe I should say the word infamous ships. There probably is no other ship as famous as this ship, and you know it as the what? The Titanic. Its full name was RMS Titanic. RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship. Did you know that? So it was a Royal Mail ship carrying about 3,500 sacks of mail, along with all sorts of letters and packages. I think we all know the story. But if you don't know, now you'll know. This is a picture of the Titanic by Francis Godolphin Osborne Stewart. Let's pull that image up. Okay. Story time, beautiful people. Here we go. This is by Francis Godolphin Osborne Stewart. This is the Titanic departing Southampton on April 10th, 1912. And as we know, at the time of her construction, she was the largest ship ever built. It was the biggest and most luxurious passenger ship of its time. It was about 269 meters long, 28 meters wide, and more than 53 meters tall. And for the Western world folks, the Americans, she was nearly 900 feet long, stood 25 stories high, and weighed an incredible 46,000 tons. So picture a 25-story building in Manhattan, maybe, Brooklyn, and you can see how tall this ship was. It had 10 decks, 3 engines, and its furnaces burnt through over 600 tons of coal. 175, we'll use the word firemen, shovel the coal by hand and worked in shifts 24 hours a day. Now, if you look here, how many stacks did it have? Do you notice? 1, 2, 3, 4. They had 4 funnels, but only 3 were functional. Why do you think? The 4th one was just for show. So it was turn of the century design, watertight compartments, and according to the builders, even if the worst possible accident at sea happened, 2 ships colliding, the Titanic would stay afloat for 2 to 3 days, which is more than enough time for nearby ships to help. You know the story. What's the story, Morning Glory? Do you remember the time, the date? April 14th, 1912, 11:40 p.m., the Titanic sideswiped a massive iceberg and damaged nearly 300 feet of the ship's hull. And of course, it allowed water to flood into 6 of her 16 major watertight compartments. It was her maiden voyage to the United States, and she carried more than 2,200 passengers and crew. Do you know how many survived or reached their destination? 705. 2:40 a.m. in the morning, 2 hours and 40 minutes from the time of the iceberg's impact, it sank into the waters below, the murky, cold North Atlantic waters. Tremendous disaster. Tremendous disaster. 2 to 3 days, 2 to 3 hours. So we're going to call this the triggering effect, the first domino. And there are a couple of ways you can take it. What were the dominoes that led to this accident? But we're going to take it from this incident here as the first domino and what happened after. Well, after that, there was changes to ship designs. Ships started being redesigned for better safety. Bulkheads were made higher, so water could not get in, and the bottoms were stretched to create double hulls. And of course, this is to create safer and more reliable travel. The radioactive 1912, it required that all sea vessels have a 24-hour radio system in place to stay in contact with other ships and coastal radio stations. All radio operators were required to obtain a license to promote the credibility and responsibility of operators. An international ice patrol in 1914 was established by the SOLAS, the Safety of Life at Sea Convention, and they were consisting of 16 nations with shipping interests in the North Atlantic. So it was first developed in 1914, pretty important year, major year for the world. The International Ice Patrol was founded to alert any sea vessels traveling in the shipping routes of Europe, Canada, and United States of any icebergs. And in 1915, the Revenue Cutter Service and the Life Saving Service was merged to found what? The United States Coast Guard. The Jones Act passed in 1920, the Merchant Marine Act. And this federal law had many components, but it allowed an individual or an employee injured at sea to file a lawsuit against their employer. So, one domino of the accident led to a whole lot of different decisions, changes. Now, today, New York City, lower, can we say lower West Side, Pier 54? There's another domino. If you ever by the Highline Park in Little Island, it's faded paint of the arch at Pier 54 on the Hudson River near 13th Street. And it shows that it was once used by the White Star Line and by the Cunard White Star. And the Titanic survivors were brought to this pier on April 18th, 1912. And basically, the arch is a remnant of the pier shed that once covered the structure. So Pier 59 was the intended berth for the Titanic, and Pier 54, where the blank ship arrived with survivors. If you know what ship it is, put it in the chat, and you will get, well, I don't want to give you a cruise because we've been talking about the Titanic. I'll take you out for $1.50 pizza in New York City. We'll have to find it if they still have those. All right? What's the name of that ship that brought the survivors back home? All right, we've been talking for a lot right now, haven't we? So what we're going to do is we want to make history fun. So I think it's time for us to do a little exercise. So I have these dice. I forget which color is hard, because I don't want to start out hard because I don't want to lose people from watching. So I think the yellow are the easier ones. All right, so let's do that. Let's shake it up and let's roll it. I promise I won't cheat. Okay, so it says here 15 tuck jumps. So we're going to take a little 2-minute break. All right, beautiful people, I'm going to pause the timer and let's take a 2-minute break. And I'm going to do it too, I promise. 2 minutes. And let's do a little exercise so our brains are getting the blood up there, okay? Let's do it. Oh my goodness. Whose idea was this? So it's a tuck jump, all right? So for a tuck jump, beautiful people, this is how you do a tuck jump. So you kind of do a squat and then you jump. All right, so let's squat. Oh, that's 1. 2. And if my form's horrible, I know I'm going to hear it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did 16 in a minute. All right. I'll wait for you all to catch up. Oh my goodness. Whose idea was it to exercise? So, how you like the screen? Well, you're exercising. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Okay. 38 seconds. Don't cheat. Do your exercise. Okay. Okay. All right, beautiful people. We're gonna get going. All right. So now, can you think of any other domino effects in history? Please put them in the chat below. Put it in the chat. What are some other domino effects in history? Probably one of the most famous domino effects in history, famous to about what, maybe 2 to 3 billion people. This oil and canvas, 11 by 8 feet. Artist is Peter Wenzel. Location, Vatican Museum. And who is the famous couple? Probably one of the most famous domino effects in history, right? Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is the title of the work. Like I said before, the artist, Peter Wenzel. And this large canvas represents the magnus opus of this man's career. He was an animalist painter, and that is to say that he specialized in a very unique type of painting. And this led him to reproducing with extraordinary effort over 200 animals from all over the world. Not only represented with pictorial ability, but with detailed knowledge and scientific precision. Isn't that amazing? Now, here's the deal. I like to jump around. Does that remind you of another famous animalist, painter? Except he's in the United States and he didn't paint. Well, this is what his specialty was. James or John James Audubon. He was actually a French-American artist, entrepreneur, naturalist, explorer, and ornithologist. So this is a Louisiana heron, now called the tricolored heron. So just making a connection between these two. So Audubon was a naturalist, explorer, ornithologist. And this man, Peter Wenzel, he was an animalist painter. So it can help you appreciate just what this man was, what type of person. Both of these men were geniuses in their work. But circling back, though, to Wenzel's painting of Adam and Eve, the domino that happened in the Garden of Eden, that the Torah, the Gospels, the Bible speak of. And so the quote unquote Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they all recognize this account. And what did it all lead to? Well, what's the domino? The first domino, of course, according to those who are readers of those books, was the original sin, right? And then subsequent generation 2, murder, Cain and Abel, and then the evil that is spread across the earth. So now we can understand the domino effect and trigger events. How about this? for a free, all-inclusive. You ready? All-inclusive cruise to Staten Island. What I want you all to do, beautiful people, is this. I am going to put on the screen the Adam and Eve painting, and I want you to list in the chat, beautiful people, as there were, remember, 200 animals found there. What I'd like you to do is I want you to write down as many animals as you can see or find in, we'll do 1 minute. Okay, so let me pull it up, and you have 1 minute to write down as many animals as you can. All right, so let's set it up. We got Adam and Eve in one corner, right? And then you have your timer in the other. All right, oh, let's make it big enough so you guys can see it. All right. You know what? Let's make it fair. I'll make the timer real small. And then let's make Adam and Eve really as big as we can. You ready? I'm giving you time. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. Type up as many animals as you can spot. There were 200 of them. Dun, 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 dun. Can I even say that? Sing that song? I don't want to, cause any rights issues by humming Jeopardy. But I give a shout out to Jeopardy, okay? Okay, let me let you concentrate. I'm sorry. 22, 20. Look, I'm giving you 3 Mississippis, 4 Mississippis, 5 Mississippis. All right. So whoever won will get a free all-inclusive cruise to Staten Island. Okay. So beautiful. Hope you participated in the exercise. Now, can you think of some other trigger events in history? There's another trigger event in history. Can you figure out this image? This is by the artist John Vanderlyn, 1847. And this is the landing of Columbus with the Nina and the Pinta in the background. I am sure you can imagine all the dominoes that fell from this event. So this is the trigger event. Now, what's fun is take this into your city or your town or your neighborhood and look for dominoes that have fallen due to trigger events in the world or your country. Can you think of trigger events in your own life that have caused you to get to where you are today or how you are today? That's for some introspection if you'd like. However, let's go to one trigger event. Oh, I forgot to, did I start the timer? Oh my goodness. Start timer. Yeah, we've been talking and I haven't started the timer back up. You guys got to remind me of these things. All right, so we've come to why we're here today. What trigger event are we going to talk about with regards to dominoes? Well, let's pull up the document. Can you tell me what scene is depicted here? We have Anglo-Saxon men in a room. They're all dressed pretty dignified. Looks like a British influence. Can you figure out what scene is depicted here and what this led to? This is John Trumbull's painting, The Declaration of what? Independence. And this is depicting the five-man drafting committee of the Declaration of Independence presenting their work to the Congress for $2. Can you tell me where this painting is found? What American currency is it found on? I just gave you a big hint. The original hangs in the US Capitol Rotunda. I recommend you tour it. It's amazing. But here's the thing. The interesting fact is that this does not represent a real ceremony. The characters portrayed here were never in the same room at the same time. By the way, did you know what the American Army's favorite food was during the Revolutionary War? Chicken cacciatore. Okay, I'll be better. I'll be better, I promise. So this is the trigger event. What did it lead to? So the interesting thing with these trigger events, right, is there are other trigger events that led to this trigger event, right? So you can run within a whole bunch of different directions. But let's take this event of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This is a pretty big trigger event. What led to that trigger event? Well, we're going to go back in time to a document. And the document is 1763. And let's look at this document. And let's see if you can figure out what this document is. Here we have this document. Can you see it? Let me make it a little larger for you. And wasn't this beautiful penmanship? I wish I could write like that. And it says, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't it say, in the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity? That's what it looks like it says, right? At having pleased the divine one. We can look it up a little later. It's probably some beautiful language. But what we're looking at here, beautiful people, is the Treaty of Paris. And what the Treaty of Paris did is it ended the French and Indian War. The three American negotiators, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay, proved themselves ready for the world stage. And basically, what were the provisions of this treaty? It was also the 7-Year War, right? It was pitting, historians call it one of the first world wars. So let's look at the map, okay? French and Indian War or 7-Year War. Let's look at the map. Remember, we have the 13 colonies, right? 13 British colonies, and you see them here on the East Coast. And who is over here? The French. And then over here, you have the Spanish claims, and pink up here is British. So everyone, well, not everybody, but let's say there's a lot of people coming to the what? The New World. And we know, we'll talk about this in another class, each area was for a reason. You know, in the beginning at the north, right, they came pilgrims, Puritans, right, for religious freedom. You'd come to the southern colonies because you want to make some money, right? Cash crop became tobacco, right? And then, of course, there are other things which we'll talk about in another lesson. But basically, what do I want to do after a while? I want more land, but where can I push? To the west. But what's blocking the west? The French. Okay, so what happens? You have the British Empire consisting of 13 colonies, and they have the territories in Canada next to French Quebec. And between 1756 and 1763, Britain fought the 7-Year War against the French in Europe and all around the world in different colonial areas, the Caribbean, North America, and India. So after the 7-Year War, what happens? Britain secures what you see here. Can you see? Do I need to annotate it for you folks? Let me do it for you. Let's use the arrow. Look at all of British's possessions. Look at all of that. They took all of this. We're the French. Bye-bye. They're gone. Spanish here. And basically what happened is in 1773, this gentleman, George Macartney, who was from an Ulster Scots family, describes Britain new power after the war as this vast empire in which the sun never sets and whose bounds nature has not yet ascertained. Have you heard that before in history? The sun never set where? Well, we know it today. We say, oh, the sun never set on the British Empire. But put that in a folder because there was another empire that same phrase was said. But for the purposes of this class, now the sun never set on the British Empire. So the war, French-Indian War, 7-Year War, that ends. The Treaty of Paris, named for the city that it was signed. And now you have this large empire. And what does that mean if you have a large empire? You have a lot more to defend, right? So, and you have to spend more what? Tax revenue on the Royal Navy and Army, and you still had to contend with these other colonies, or I'm sorry, other nations who are coveting this land. And what do you have to make sure? Where's Britain? On the other side of the Atlantic. So you have to make sure that you can keep your people under control. And with war, what happens with war, beautiful people? What happens with war? Should we pull it up for you? Let's pull it up for you. Come on, Miller. I had a nice little image for you to show you what happens with war. All right, beautiful people. What happens with war? You got a whole lot of debt. So, in January 1763, Great Britain's national debt was more than 122 million pounds, which is, of course, the British monetary unit. And you're like, 122 million pounds, that's nothing. I can get a bunch of Earl Grey tea and shepherd's pie. No, interest on the debt was 4.4 million pounds a year. So I did a calculation, and okay, math is not my gift to the world. So I plugged it into the computer and, accounting for time and inflation and 2026. And this is what I came up with. And if you come up with something different, you can express yourself freely. 122 million pounds in 1763 would be today. I got this total. It sounds like a lot, but 31,416,000. No, wait a minute. Yeah. 31,416,000,000 $461,303.76. What do you guys say in England? Pence? I don't know. Pardon me. US dollars, 42,148,324,485.12. We'll just round it off to $185 because I don't think we're using pennies anymore. So, where would England be looking? Where would they be looking to pay off this debt? There's a big hint in the picture. And what else would be the challenge? What else would be the challenge? It's a famous quote. I'll pull it up. You probably know this quote. And this is a cartoon that was in Harper's Weekly in 1877. And what does it say? You know the famous quote. Can you see it? To the victor belong the spoils. And this is Andrew Jackson sitting on a hog atop of a tomb. Don't understand the reasoning behind this. We'll have to do a deep dive in this another time. But it's Thomas Nast, an artist from 1840 to 1902. But what were the spoils? Well, we showed you the map, right? That were the spoils. A huge empire. A huge empire, and now you have to guard it. So, who received what? By the terms of the treaty, France renounced to Britain all of mainland North America east of the Mississippi, excluding New Orleans and the environs, the West Indian islands of Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, and Tobago, and all French conquests made in 1749 in India or the East Indies. Britain, in return, restored to France the West Indian islands of, can you guess? Guadeloupe, Martinique, says Marie Galante and Desiree Day, the islands of St. Pierre off Newfoundland and Miquelon, and the West African colony of Senegal, and some others. Isn't that interesting? And what languages do those countries speak? You see the dominoes? Spain at the same time recovered. Can you guess where? Havana, Onana. Manila. They ceded East and West Florida to the British. And as you can see, right, in the map, do you see the difference? They received Louisiana, including New Orleans, in compensation from the French. So the French evacuated Hanover, Hesse, I might be pronounced that incorrectly, and Brunswick. So you got this problem of imperial debt, and that wasn't the only thing facing the British. What else was facing the British? I wish I could have put more things on the king's shoulder. We already talked about the debt as the issue after the 7-Year War, but maintaining order in where? America was a challenge. Even though they got Canada from France, who's still living in these areas? You have to think about peaceful relations with the Native American tribes, and that was not going well. And so as a result of that, the British decided to keep a standing army in America. Keeping a standing army in America would mean that you have to do what? Maintain the army. What does an army need? Are you putting the dots together? If you really want to jump ahead, think of the Bill of Rights and some of the rights that were demanded by this new country. A lot of these decisions would lead to a variety of problems with colonists. There was an uprising on the Ohio frontier. It was called the Pontiac's Rebellion, and it led to the Proclamation of 1763, which banned colonial settlement west of the Allegheny Mountains. So this would lead to conflicts with land-hungry settlers and land speculators like George Washington. So when you're in a tight position, what do? You need to tighten control. So they felt like they needed to tighten control of their empire. And of course, there were laws regulating imperial trade and navigation. They had these laws, but the Americans, colonists, were notorious for evading these regulations. They were doing underhanded trading with this and that. You know, people are going to be people, right? People were peopling, right? And from the British point of view, you know what? As they're drinking their Earl Grey cup of tea, they felt that it was only right. It was definitely only right, good chap, that the American colonists pay their fair share of the costs for their own defense. And if additional revenue could be realized through stricter control, then, hey, through trade and navigation, let's do it. So the British began their attempts to reform the imperial system. Is it all coming together? Oh my goodness, guys and girls, beautiful people, we are going overtime. So I tell you what, let's end off with a quote. This is, man, there's so many good quotes about this. I thought this was an interesting quote by Aisha Taryam. Let's look at it. I'll give you two quotes just to get your brains chewing on something interesting. Here's your first one. The cost of war is like an immeasurable tremor that knows no borders, its shock waves reverberating across the world, resulting in universal suffering. I think a lot of people can relate to that. And once again, you see this domino effect. But I thought this was an interesting quote. It's a quote by Sun Tzu, and I could be pronouncing his name incorrectly. I should have really looked that up before I did that, because my Chinese or my command of those languages are I can't get those pronunciations, those tonal languages. But if it was Arabic, I could do it. Who wishes to fight must first count the cost. How powerful is that? Do you see the context, or do you see how this principle could apply to, well, a lot of the wars, but also to this war that the British faced with regards to the French Indian War, but then what it led up to, which we're talking about the march or the steps to the revolution. This makes me think of a famous quote of the Christ. He said, right, before you build a tower, sit down and count the cost. So it's a principle that's a universal principle that doesn't just apply to war, but to all things in life. But anyway, the cost of war, of course, is not just financial. Usually, as soon as we hear the word cost, we think of finance, but it's more than just dollars and cents when it comes to war. Interestingly, the Global Peace Index, which is something put together by the International Peace Institute, it covers about 163 countries, comprising of 99.7% of the world's population. Their statistic, if you look at their website, it says that the 2023 GPI found that expenditure on peace building and peacekeeping totaled 34.1 billion in 2022, which equals only 0.4% of military spending. Wow, that's a lot of money. So why do I bring up that statistic? The reason why I bring that up is because to make history interesting, if history and social studies are not your jam, let's end with one more quote. It's by Confucius. And Confucius said this: "Where are you, Confucius? Confucius said, beautiful people, study the past. Whoops. Thank you for your patience, everybody. You can tell I'm not AI, right? With all these mistakes. Study the past if you would define the future. Make these connections to what you're learning to present day, and it'll make history live for you. All right, beautiful people? You know what time it is right now, beautiful people? This is what time it is. You cannot close this channel, beautiful people, without this. Okay? I'm pulling this up. Do not shut your computers off until you take your exit ticket. What was something big and what was something small that you learned today in your lesson? What was something big and what was something small? And what I'd like you to do is text what you learned to a friend. All right? Can you do that? I think you can do that. And what I'd like to say is I appreciate your support. Please like, comment, freely comment. I look at all comments and I will do my best to respond to you because you took the time to place your thoughts and your answers in the chat. I really appreciate that. And please subscribe as it supports the channel. If you have any other ideas for things that you'd like to see covered in history, put it down. And you may, beautiful people, just see it one day. Okay? Thank you for joining. And we look forward to continuing the domino effect. Take care of yourselves, beautiful people.